Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Season Ticket Holders. I have another very special guest for me today. He's been a pain in my side a little bit over the last decade. He is a former University of Queensland teammate, alumni with me, radio extraordinaire, Melbourne Storm tragic. He's the sports lead at the Australian Radio Network. Harrison Priebe, thanks for joining me, mate.
What an introduction. I've never had an introduction like that before. But yeah, what an honour. I've come dressed for the occasion. And what an honour and privilege to be in the company of a fellow UQ alumni. It's been an incredible journey.
No, awesome, mate. Look where we are now. Who would have thought? I remember
Oh.
Harrison was the person who taught me what a vox pop was. So, do you remember that?
I remember getting around university days, and I just remember seeing this kid in a Broncos jersey. I'm like, he's a rugby league fan. He must be cool.
Oh, we worked out. You remember you took me out there. You learned me the vox pops. You got the radio. So look at us now. We've come very far in our sports careers. So it's really good to see, mate. Love listening to your stuff on the radio. You've had me on a few times as well, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Living the dream.
Mate, that's it. That's what we're doing. Now, look, Harrison, firstly, though, mate, you're down in Melbourne and you've just covered the F1. I know you're wearing your Melbourne Storm shirt. You can't wait to talk about that. But firstly, you did get to cover the F1. Awesome, exciting race. F1 Open, the Australian Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri crashing out, mate. Can you tell us what that whole experience was like? It was obviously a wet weather race and heartbreak to see the local hero. He was in contention for a podium, but unfortunately just didn't happen.
Yeah, it was a wild experience. 4 seasons in a few days, pretty much across Melbourne. Some hot weather during qualifying on the Saturday, and the McLarens were doing so well. Oscar Piastri just nailing it. First in practice one, second in qualifying. So did an amazing run across the entire weekend. And for 45 laps, it was just the hope and belief was growing that this could be it. This could be our guy up on the podium at the end of the race. And then it all came unstuck on lap 45, the dreaded lap 45, and just the collective groan from the grandstands and the media room that his
Terrible
hopes had
heartbreak,
been
mate.
dashed in that moment. But yeah, he finished ninth overall, managed to claw his way back up the leaderboard for a ninth place finish. But yeah, credit to Lando Norris, just ran in the wet conditions perfectly.
That McLarens, man, they look like they're going to be
Oh,
just about the team to beat if they can stop Red Bull and Verstappen.
yeah, I think they're a cut above the rest of the pack. They're going to have a really strong F1 season, I think.
Yeah, Melbourne just had to ruin Piastri, right? So we thank you guys for that, or
He'll never come back.
yeah. Well, it's good to see it back in the F1 calendar anyway as the season
Yeah,
over.
absolutely. I
Uh,
think he's going to have a strong run for sure this season. I think
yeah,
one little blip, but hopefully he can bounce back in China.
mate, you'd have to think he's going to get a few wins from there. If they're showing that pace this early in the season, you'd have to think he's going to have a few podiums yet.
I think so. It's going to be a big season. Let's hope the Aussie can do well.
Let's go, Oscar. Mate, now we're obviously here mainly to talk about rugby league. Now, what I've been doing with my guests, firstly, is just to talk us through about how you got into rugby league, why you love your sport, and why you become the big fan, obviously, that we can see that you are today.
Well, I started watching rugby league. I remember collecting the rugby league cards when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and remember watching a few games on the telly, but probably wasn't until I watched the Storm Dragons grand final in 1999, but it probably wasn't until I was about 11 years old. I remember eating some Nutri-Grain for breakfast, and there was Stephen Kearney on the back of the Nutri-Grain box. And I'm
That's
like,
one
that
way to
is
get him in.
yeah. I'm like, that is so cool. He looks so cool in his Storm jersey. And then I was like, I never really identified with the team, prior to then, being a Victorian. I was like, what team can I go for? I was living in Queensland at that time. I'm like, can't go for the Broncos.
Well, you could have. You definitely could
Yeah,
have.
I could have, but I was like, nah, they're not my team. I don't identify with them. But then, yeah, I had watched the Storm Grand Final in beating the Dragons in 1999. And I think, yeah, Melbourne Storm, a team in AFL heartland, thriving in the NRL, and I'm like, that's going to be my team. And it's been a long journey ever since.
And I mean, just talk us through about what it is like. Obviously, you're covering it down there, but you are the sole NRL team in Victoria. We hear about it all the time. What is the cut through like at the moment as far as the coverage and how the people of Melbourne get behind the Storm? Obviously, they've been just about the most dominant, successful team of the last 2 decades in the NRL, perennial contenders. But what is it like down there, being a fan, being a reporter as well, and covering it behind enemy lines?
Constantly growing. The support has been unreal. I think they almost cracked. I think they cracked over 35,000 members last season. I think they're gunning for about 40,000 this year, and that's incredible numbers across the NRL. But for a team in Melbourne where AFL dominates, it's such an impressive job, and they've built their culture on success. And I think, in the early days they struggled from getting about 8,000 fans to a game, and now today in 2025 they're getting 25 to 30,000 per game. So they really sell themselves well. It's a family club, really close knit club. The players are close, the staff are close together, and I think that's really driving their success. And it's really resonating with fans who may support a team that isn't going so well in the AFL, and they always have their second team is the Melbourne Storm, and they love getting around to Amy Park, and they put on a great show every second weekend.
Was going to say I've been down there at Amy Park a few times, and it is like an awesome, just a
Mm.
little rugby league. Well, not little, but like that nice little mid-sized, like a skilled park at the Gold Coast or even up in Townsville. Like it is that perfect size for rugby league when it isn't like the dominant sport and that type of thing. It is a good spot to watch footy, isn't it?
Yeah, I remember attending the prelim last year at Amy Park. 30,000 fans. It was pretty much a sellout at Amy Park. But the game was one thing, but the entertainment was another thing. Like they had fireworks pre-game, entertainment throughout. So it's really family friendly affair, and plus they're a pretty good footy team to watch as well. So it's just the whole package of attending a Storm game at Amy Park is an unreal experience, and you're so close to the action as well. I think that really is a good selling point.
Mate, just a sign of how far they actually have come. I remember going to what was the old stadium called? Olympic, what was it
The
called?
graveyard,
The
Olympic Park.
Olympic
Yeah.
Park, that was it. I remember going to Olympic Park with my girlfriend at the time. She was a Melbourne Storm supporter. I was a Brisbane Broncos supporter. Went to that game. It's like going to park footy, essentially. You had these nice stadiums around it, but then here you had the little Melbourne Storm in a little park footy arena. I think the Broncos got pumped by about 50 that day. And she was obviously very happy. I don't think there was much chat on the way home. But that was a sign of, and then a few years later, obviously, they built that stadium, they went back
Mm.
into it. They were always successful at that time too, but the city sort of embraced them now, paid them back, and now they are considered, one of the premier clubs in the city, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, they had good memories of the graveyard. There was the running track as well. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
remember that
it
right
was so
around it.
far away from the action. It was like watching them play on an AFL footy field. It was, you were pretty far away, and yeah, just looking back at those days, they'd get at worst like 5,000 fans, and there was questions when they didn't make finals in the early 2000s whether the interest in Melbourne was waning, whether the Melbourne Storm would survive, or whether they some people were calling for them to be relocated. But then you bring in a coach like Craig Bellamy in the early 2000s, and the way he has driven that success and that sustained success in the team, and it's slowly built up culture, a few premierships. We've been through some hard times, but
A
I
few
think the
strip
loy-
premierships, don't forget that
yeah,
part.
I think the loyalty from the supporters. They're a passionate supporter base, and they love to see the Storm winning, and yeah, just to see the fan base growing, the better, much better venue to play at. Amy Park's, I think, one of the best stadiums and closest vantage point to the players that you can get. It's a great experience.
I was going to say too, as much as you guys love them, I think Melbourne, because of their success, have become one of the teams everyone loves to hate. I know, especially love to beat. I know just from my Broncos, it's been a very tough couple decades. We got them in the 2006 grand final, of course. Happy memories, but then a lot of heartbreak after that. My saddest Melbourne Storm moment was I believe it was the 2008 semi-final. I don't know if you remember this. It was Wayne Bennett at the time, his last game in charge. There's been a lot of build up in the lead up to the game. You know where I'm going with this, don't you?
Yeah.
We cough the ball up. We're in front with like a minute or less to go, and then Inglis crosses in that corner. I remember standing up in my seat walking out the stadium, out the front of the train station at Milton End, and bawling my eyes out. So that's the memories that, yeah, I know you're loving it. That's the
Ah,
memories that I have of the Melbourne Storm and the Broncos rivalry. But that's with all NRL teams too, not just with them. It's just that team that you love to beat because of how successful they've been, right?
that was an incredible moment. I was at Suncorp Stadium that year too, and I was in the Storm Bay, and we were resigned to the fact that we were going to lose. We had such a great year that year, and the Broncos were better than us. And then that moment happened where we crossed in the dying seconds, and the heartbreak of the Broncos fans, and then the Storm Bay, just pure elation and the excitement and joy that we're going to another grand final. But if it's any consolation, that was Cameron Smith got suspended for a tackle that game, and we got flogged by Manly in the grand final. So I'm
Yeah,
sure
hated to
Broncos
see it.
fans
I
would have
hated
loved
to see
that.
it. Yeah, yeah. Justice and stuff. No, 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 very good, mate. It's very good. And obviously, even since then, Melbourne have continued on. They've been there. They've done it all before. They've done it all again since then, of course. But we'll get now to the actual season, of course, coming off a lot of expectation on you guys. Going down pretty tight grand final last year to the Panthers. It was an exciting game. I enjoyed it as a neutral. A lot of people said it wasn't the most exciting game. But Melbourne have obviously come out. You had some issues with Munster last year with injuries. I know Jerome Hughes had his issues as well. Looking into this preseason, building that round one performance, what have you made of them so far? Because right now they are the premiership favourites to take it all out.
I feel like they're very settled, and I feel like they're fitter, which I think is a great stepping stone to, take that next step to hopefully win a premiership. And they've recruited another big name in Stefano Udikamanu. Nailed that one.
You did very well, mate. You come to
um,
Fox Sports.
and I think that's what we were missing last year, that extra enforcer beside Big Nelson, Asafa Solomona, especially, there was periods of last season where he didn't play. He was unfit, suspended. So having another big enforcer in that Melbourne Storm squad will add some punch in their front row, I think. And I think it's going to be a very dangerous season from what we saw in round one against the Eels. A fit Cameron Munster certainly helps that. He looked in prime peak condition in that Eels game.
I did want to talk to you about that because Munster obviously in and out last year, even with Origin, didn't play at all in the end, did he? Didn't play a game.
No, no,
No,
yeah,
they
ruled
didn't.
out the
So
entire Origin series.
that's
Magic
right.
Round, I think, was injured to that groin.
Yeah, that's right. And then it kept him out. And, obviously Queensland missed him. We saw that, they did pretty well without him as well. But, he could have made a big difference there in that decider as well. But he looks fit and firing because that game one performance, I know it's a bit hard to judge on the Eels side that looks like they're going to be struggling a little bit, but you'd have to think that he wants to get back there. He'd want to get that Maroons jersey back if he's fit and
Mm.
firing and all that. What have you made of him so far? And do you think, he can get back to those heights? Because based on that game one performance, the round one performance, it looks like he's firing.
Yeah, it was kind of unknown what kind of surgery he had in the off season. There was like reports of his groin, but then he mentioned he had like a double hip operation as well. But whatever it was, he is moving freely now. He was obviously hampered at times last year, even when he came back. I don't think he was like fully fit. And then he's lost a bit of weight in the off season as well,
Is he off the
which
grog as well? I know we always go on about the
I
beers
think
off the
so.
drink.
I think they're all on a booze ban, which is I saw a podcast that they were on, and they were all doing a booze ban for the year. I think the weekend, maybe one weekend red was allowed, but
Fair enough.
and I think that's a good thing that the spine's really that determined and focused for to go one better this season, that they're willing to sacrifice a few treats during the course of the season. And yeah, Cameron Munster just looks so back to his best, and I think he's going to have a real dangerous year this year, especially with that Storm spine.
And of course, to that spine too, we all know about Jerome Hughes and Harry Grant, but I want to talk about Ryan Pappenhausen because there's always
Mm.
these stories coming out. Incredibly to think about fighting for his spot and his future because you got Falongo right waiting in the wings. It's always crazy to think about that. There is this agenda a little bit that it's like he is fighting for a spot, but then when he's fit, it doesn't look like that at all. Like it's crazy. Like he's clearly your number one, and I know he's had his injuries and he had some horrific injuries from that knee, was that a couple of years back.
Mm.
But he looks amazing, mate, and like he can take you all the way because on his day he's up there with the best fullbacks in the game. Just about top three, top five when he's on. What have you made of him and him coming back? Because he looked pretty good as well.
I think it was the Ryan Pappenhausen we saw in 2020 when he was best on ground in the grand final. He had his setbacks with injury. He's pretty much the Terminator now with how many surgeries he's had. He's been had such an unlucky run with injuries, but to see him sort of getting back to his potential last year and playing in a grand final, and then his efforts, he's gone the bleached hair this year, brand new fresh looking mullet,
It's that
and
Melbourne
he,
rubbing off on him down
yeah,
there.
yeah. From all reports, he's got a misso now. They're settled in Melbourne, loving life. He's just signed a new contract, and I think that's taken a lot of pressure off, and he can just focus on his footy. And obviously, he's had a big pre-season. I think all the Spine have came back early in their pre-season just to sort of knuckle down, and we saw him absolutely carve up against the Eels in round one. Arguably the best player on ground for that weekend. I think that bodes well, and who knows? Maybe if he keeps up the level, could be fitting somewhere in that Blues outfit and that Blues squad middle of the year.
You reckon you could squeeze him in there somewhere?
He's pretty handy, isn't he? He's
Yeah, I
got some
mean,
speed. He's speed. Like to have like knee surgery and ankle issues, I'm still stunned how fast he is. It's quite incredible. He hasn't lost much pace at all, and I think that's the dedication. He does the 1%ers all throughout his rehab. I think he went to the States to see this prominent physio that has worked on all the NFL stars, and just his dedication to do the extras, that little bit of training to get back to his peak fitness is why he's getting back to his best.
yeah, I think it was Bill Knowles, wasn't it? I think he's worked with Ryan,
Yeah,
worked with Tom Trbojevic rather, and he
yeah,
seems to get in the back. Yeah, when they got those serious injuries, get them back to his best. I remember covering his game. What was it like 3 years ago now? I think when I was at Fox doing some match reports when he shattered his knee. I think it was when he went into a
yeah.
tackle and just came, and it was
10, 10 different,
horrific.
yeah,
Man,
10
one.
different places he broke that kneecap.
It was. I remember watching it live. Everyone in the office gasped because it's one of the worst things I've seen on a footy field, at least. And for him to come back now, and every time he's back and he's fit, he looks like he's just one of the best out there. Like I can't see that. You'd think any normal person, mate, if that happened to you, you would never be the same again. But for him to have, I suppose you'd have to credit his resilience. Like it's something inside internally, like the mental game that you wouldn't be able to teach, right? Like there must be something inside him that just never gives up.
I think you can see some similarities between him and Billy Slater, especially the back end of Billy's career when he had troubles with his shoulders and he was out for long periods of time. He just has that same sort of demeanor where he's just sort of focused, determined, resilient, and I think Pappenhausen himself like did a lot of his rehab with Billy, getting some advice and leaning on him and his family while he was struggling with his rehab with those injuries. So I think there's evidence that you can see a little bit of Billy inside Ryan Pappenhausen, and I think who knows where he can go in his career. Hopefully he remains injury free and we can see the best from Ryan Pappenhausen.
We could all use a little Queenslander inside us, couldn't we?
Absolutely.
That'll help. It's that Queensland spirit, mate. That'll always get you through. Now, look, and just on that round one performance, obviously against the Eels, 56-18. I remember reading a story. It was one of the, as far as bookies goes, one of the biggest payouts the sports betting market's ever seen
Yeah.
in Australia. And I can tell you, my mate Kevin, we were at the casino. Shout out to you, Kevin. I know he's a listener. He won a $1,200 multi. I think Warbrick had to score. He got that intercept try to go down the other end. We actually weren't even watching live at the time. We were out the back, and then we saw that. We all went wild. So crazy game. Obviously, though, in saying that, it is hard to judge on round one performance. We all think Melbourne are going to be there, but Eels isn't exactly going to be the best test. But just based on
No,
that performance, they really dominated that first 40, didn't they? It seems like they maybe took their foot off the pedal a little bit. Obviously, they had the luxury of bringing some players off in the second half. But just based on that performance, you'd have to think that that premiership favoritism. Right now, I think they're paying 330 to win the title. The
Yeah.
Broncos, surprisingly, maybe a little bit, especially after the weekend, they're still the second favorites. But that 330 price tag, do you think that's a fair sort of assessment of where they're at the moment?
I think they've been sort of had that round one game circled in the calendar ever since they lost the grand final. And I think, there is a determination this year in this Melbourne Storm squad to sort of, prove that they deserve to be premiers at the end of the year. And I think with the work that they've done in the off season, the motivation, they've kept their squad together, and I think they're going to be even more dangerous this year. And I think that's the difference. There's been a lot of changes to a lot of squads, but this core Melbourne Storm group, preventing any injuries, has remained together. And the backup players that they do have, Falongo, for instance, the fact
Yeah.
that, he can't even get a spot in the squad, they have some good, dangerous depth as
Wishart
well.
just sitting on the bench there, which every club
Yeah.
would be starting him, but Melbourne
Oh,
has the luxury of playing him if the benches are 14.
what an amazing prospect. And there was there's rumors going around that he could be in for a crack in the Blue squad this year. He went up for the New South Wales Origin camp in the off season, and he's looking to stake his claim as for that utility spot. And he's really Tyron Wishart, a player that's really sort of taken that utility role and just taken it to the next level. And who would have thought that a utility could be one of the best players going around at the moment?
Geez, based on your assessment, mate, the Melbourne Storm will make up the whole Blue squad, right?
Who
Big
knows?
fan. And mate, one storyline I did want to touch on too. It's always the Willie with the Woney with Craig Bellamy. I suppose you never really know. He likes to take it year by year, but where do you think he's sitting at? What's his current situation now, and when do you think he's going to bow out? And will he ever bow out? Because I know he did learn from the best in Wayne Bennett. Is he just going to go all the way and never be able to throw it in?
I don't know. It's hard to say. You just never know with Bellamy. He keeps his cards very close. He doesn't give too much away. But one thing I know is that he loves Melbourne. He loves the Storm, and he's transformed rugby league and NRL in Melbourne, and I think he cares deeply about that. I can't see him coaching anywhere else, to be honest. And yeah, I guess it's really in his favour. It's really his final say at the end. However long he wants to go, that's how long he'll stay. I see hopefully another couple of years in him. I'm a bit biased though, but if this is the final year and they go out with the premiership, then yeah, that could be a fairy tale too. But you just never know. But I'm
Could you
hoping,
see?
fingers crossed, he stays on for one more year. I think all the Storm fans just hope, like, yeah, just one more year, one more year.
Could you see a world where you win the premiership and he does hang it up at the end of this year? I suppose the other aspect of that is he would be the type of guy you'd have to have a successor, wouldn't you? Because that's the big problem with a lot of those clubs, especially when they've done something like a Bellamy or Bennett. It's the person who goes after him that becomes the real problem. And I suppose, and still Melbourne Storm have that plan in place, he'd be pretty hesitant, I reckon, to step down.
Yeah, I think they have to plan early and maybe not make any announcements too soon. Maybe even don't announce anything until after the season if Bellamy decides to step down, because I think if you announce early in the season, that can be a bit of a distraction. Then there's this expectation and pressure on the side to, go out with that fairy tale, and puts pressure on the new coach coming in potentially as well. So I think playing it closely, making a decision even after is a good idea.
What's he like to deal with? Like interviewing? Obviously, I'm based in Sydney, so I don't get to seriously go to too many of his press conferences and things like that. I know the boys, you mentioned that podcast that they have together. I love listening to that podcast. Those guys do a great job, those Melbourne Storm boys. And they obviously have a very, very high opinion of him. You can tell anytime the players or anyone who's even come in contact with Craig have such a high opinion of him. He seems to also sort of be one of the boys as well, like a Wayne Bennett mold of coaches where, you're a player person first and sort of a manager second. What's he like to deal with from a media point of view?
He's interesting. He's a fascinating character. His ability to sort of, he's got the trust of the group. His ability to not give away too much. He never gives away too much, but he just gives the media enough to sort of like, wow, that's an interesting take. Like, he was talking about, the current spine and whether how they compare to, the Melbourne Storm spines of past and how they stack up. And you get his honest takes, but he doesn't always give you the full story. So I think, yeah, he's very respected in that down in Melbourne with the media, but he keeps his cards close. He's very sort of more of a private person, but I think he strikes the right balance.
Yeah, definitely learn a lot from Wayne, mate. That's for sure. Now, Harrison, you must be excited, mate. This is the one Thursday night in Melbourne, the
Mm,
grand final rematch. I saw a thing that the other day, I think one of the other guys was talking about on a podcast, but there was a bit of a sliding doors moment between these two teams when Cam Smith bowed out in the 2020 grand final. And since then, Nathan Cleary's led Penrith to four in a row. So it's sort of like, in a way, an immortal passing the torch to potentially, well, you'd have to think a future immortal as well. Nathan Cleary, obviously incredible to shut down, but they're coming off one of the biggest upset losses, or for Roosters, one of the biggest wins they've seen in recent history. A real shock result. I think Roosters were paying
mm.
like 10-1. What have you made of Penrith after that game?
They I think they showed they were vulnerable in that situation. A team that they should have comprehensively beaten with the squad that they have. Do they? I guess there's question marks. Do they have the same firepower in the forwards with James Fisher Harris? He was like their main enforcer last year, and he adds that extra danger in the Panthers forward pack, and that's where they really got on top of teams. Their forward dominance to shut down rival teams, and then obviously no Jerome Luai in the halves. So are they the same Penrith outfit? I think they're still going to be a dangerous outfit, and the prospect of them coming off a loss and facing, being red hot against Melbourne is adds some more spice to this grand final rematch. So I think it's going to be a very tight game, and there's lots of interesting narratives to look forward to.
You know what I reckon it was, mate, that last game? Viva Las Vegas. I think it was. I know they talk about it a little bit, but I think that hangover
Oh,
is real. I know with the Broncos and going over to Vegas last year, I do think, I know they get the 2 weeks off and the jet lag, but you'd have to think, I know a lot of the players talk about it. It's become like this NRL-esque, Origin-esque build-up.
yeah,
They're over there. It must be a big dump for these players. If you have that build-up for a grand final, the game's over and you don't have to go and play again next week. Whereas you're starting your season with all this hype. I know the Broncos
yeah.
went through it last year. You do have to think there is a little bit of a hangover that comes from, I suppose, just that big boost that they get from having this incredible occasion that most teams don't know how to handle because only a few have done it so far. But I have to think that hangover does play just a little bit into their minds. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how they come out this week, but I think that's a little bit why they might have struggled last week.
Oh yeah, I think so. Just the schedule of going to the States and Vegas and the whole occasion, the fireworks and the excitement of being there for that moment, and then having to
Casinos, the
and then
nightclubs.
yeah, all the strip going on the strip, doing all sorts of things. Maybe like footy takes a back seat in that moment when they're not
Yeah.
playing, and then obviously the long flight back home, having to sort of get used to the time zone again and prepare for a round two game in the space of a week isn't an easy thing. So I think the Panthers are going to be on alert this week, and I think they're going to improve. But I think Melbourne Storm off the back of a bye, a little bit extra rest and training, a few extra training sessions. I think it's going to be a really hot clash.
I know I went to Las Vegas probably 10 years ago now in Kentucky, and I didn't sleep one lick when I was there. So uh, I'm sure they got a bit more sleep than I did, but it is a city, Sin City.
I
Uh,
need to put down to cover it next year. I'm missing out. Hopefully, the Storm are there next year, and I can have an excuse to go.
oh, join the club, mate. I'm putting my hand up for Fox Sports News. If anyone's listening out there, thank you. Yeah,
Where are
no,
we
I
going to
think that.
go?
Sorry.
Where are we going to go? Where's
Yeah,
the
no,
spot to go?
yeah, the Bellagio. I went and played poker there. That was one of my dreams when I went there a
Oh,
decade ago. And I was a big poker guy growing up. And there was like
mm,
Doyle Brunson sitting there. I got a glimpse of Phil Ivey. I was a big poker nerd back in the day, and I always wanted to play at the Bellagio. I spent all day there tipping $1 for White Russians.
yeah.
So that's if that's not the dream, mate, I don't know what is. I can't wait to go back.
Oh, what an experience.
It was awesome, mate. Look, Harrison, thank you very much, mate. I think we've covered a lot. The Melbourne Storm. Look, you'd have to think they are going to be tough to beat. I can't wait to come up against them, see what the Broncos can do against them this year. They are, I would say, deserved favourites at this point in the season. But
Let's
there you
go.
go, mate. You know what you used to do? You know a story I was going to bring up with you, actually? I remember, what would you do for about 5 years straight? I think Zero Tackle would release the ladder on Facebook, and you would tag me every single week
Ah,
because the caption was caption a mate whose team's below you. And you did it
yeah,
right through the Wooden Spoon 2020 Brisbane era. So you happy about
every
that, mate?
every week, every week I tag you.
He
I'm
didn't
like,
miss a
oh,
week.
look where the Broncos are. I wonder if
God, I
they
hope.
still do that. I could probably still do that. Hey?
I think he has too much time on his hands. So if your employers are listening, get him off Facebook. Look, Harrison, mate, thank you so much for joining us, mate. You can catch Harrison. Talk us through where you can catch you, mate, and listen to those beautiful dulcet tones on the radio.
I pop up on Gold FM there in Sydney or Gold FM down in Melbourne too, reading weekend sports. Yeah, absolutely living the dream down here and getting to cover the best events going around in the country. It's an absolute privilege.
All right, we'll forgive you for being a Melbourne Storm fan for today, mate. Well, look, Harrison, thank you very much, mate. I hope the Melbourne Storm go well and have a good season. And thanks for joining us on Season Ticket Holders.
Good to be on, Dane. Cheers. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, mate, and thanks for listening, everybody. Bye bye.